Hi, I'm Emma,
And I'm Hannah.
and tonight we're going to take a look into the past and investigate the Vietnam War.
We're also going to take a look into sports, culture, and even have a special interview that explains why the president started to withdraw troops from Vietnam.
So let's not waste any time and get started. Why did the U.S. get involved in the Vietnam War?
The U.S. got involved in the Vietnam War because they did not want communism to spill over into the other countries around it. They also, they saw Vietnam as a threat for the other countries because they know that the domino effect would happen where the other countries around it would start to turn to communism as well. And once the U.S. got invested in the Vietnam War, they didn't want to throw all that they had invested away, so they had to keep continuing with troops because they wanted to try to win the war.
Who are the allies of the United States?
While the U.S. was the main ally of South Vietnam, however, they also had Australia, Korea, New Zealand, and Thailand to
Who
help
was the
them.
president during the Vietnam War?
At the beginning of the war was Kennedy. However, after he was assassinated, his successor, Lyndon B. Johnson, had to take over with moving troops into Vietnam. After one term of his presidency, Johnson did not want to continue moving the troops into Vietnam, so Richard Nixon had to take over and end the Vietnam War.
Who is the U.S. helping South Vietnam fight against?
The U.S. was helping South Vietnam fight against North Vietnam, the communists that were trying to take them over.
Who are the allies of North Vietnam?
Well, the allies of North Vietnam were China and the Soviet Union, but they also had the Viet Cong, that was their secret agents that were located in South Vietnam because they wanted to revolt against the South Vietnamese government.
What was the result of the Vietnam War?
Well, when Richard Nixon took over for presidency, he slowly withdrew troops, so by 1973 there was almost no American involvement in South Vietnam. So eventually they had to surrender to North Vietnam, facing them with communism. After that, we created the War Powers Act, where Congress has to approve of any president involvement. Like any time he wants to send troops to another country, they have to approve of it before he can do it and slowly start war. And now for a special interview with Sarah. Who were the angriest about the war?
The number one protesters were students from colleges. Campus unrest is one of the most remembered aspects of the Vietnam War.
What are some of the things that students did to protest?
Students occupied buildings across college campuses, forcing many schools to cancel classes. A student strike in May 1970, and they also formed a student organization called SDS.
Tell us more about that organization.
SDS stands for Students for a Democratic Society. This organization was formed in 1960 by students looking for an alternate to stifling Cold War politics. SDS, all-purpose progressivism, helped them spread on campuses around the country, and by 1966 they had begun to focus nationally on anti-war efforts.
What exactly happened at the student strikes?
Well, the strike happened at the University of Washington in May 1970. The strike was organized in reaction to the expansion of the Vietnam War in Cambodia, the killings of student protesters at Kent State University, and to reconstitute the university as a center for organizing against the war in Southeast Asia.
What was another major reason for the anti-war movement to grow?
Opposition to the war grew as television and press coverage graphically showed the suffering of both civilians and conscripts.
Go.
When did the movement end?
The United States ended its official involvement in the war in 1973.
What were some of the major protest acts or things that strikers did to revolt against the government?
Tearing up and burning draft papers was the start to many protests to occur.
Were there any key leaders to the protests or strikes?
The most famous person to lead a protest was the world heavyweight boxing champion Muhammad Ali.
Were all Americans protesting against President Johnson's decisions in the war?
A poll held in 1968 showed that 46% of Americans approved of Johnson's handling of the war, while 50% believed that it was essential to combat the expansions of communism in Southeast Asia.
Although Although there was war in Vietnam, life continued on at home in the U.S. Although the war was happening, what was going on at home in the world of sports?
Well, in the 1960s, football was the major sport that came of age, and when the Vietnam War started and the president started sending troops to Vietnam, the NFL players were called to duty, and some went overseas while others participated in programs to support the war effort.
What were the popular trends among music during the Vietnam War?
During the 1960s, rock and roll was very popular, and one of the key people who influenced this time period was Elvis Presley.
What role did women play in the Vietnam War?
Women, now more than ever, were involved in the Vietnam War. They were able to get involved, however, men were very much against them being a part of everything. However, they didn't let that get to them, and they became nurses and tended to a lot of the men's injuries on base.